I remember the exact moment it clicked. We were sitting around a table after work, nothing serious, just casual conversation. Someone made a joke about me. It wasn't brutal, it wasn't cruel, but it lingered just a second too long. Everyone laughed, including me. And that was the moment something shifted. Not loudly, not obviously, but I felt it. From that point forward, interruptions came easier. Small dismissals became normal. My opinions were acknowledged but not weighted. It wasn't hostility, it was downgrade. At the time, I thought I just needed to be sharper, more confident, maybe more assertive. What I didn't realize was this: I had signaled something. Not weakness, not incompetence, something subtler. I had signaled that my position in the room was movable, and once people sense that you can be moved, they test you. Not because they're evil, not because they hate you, because social dynamics are constantly recalibrating. Respect isn't decided once, it's continuously inferred. And most people don't lose respect in one dramatic moment. They leak it in small, almost invisible signals. Today, we're going to break down the specific signal that quietly invites disrespect, and the three ways it shows up in everyday behavior. Once you see it, you won't unsee it. And once you remove it, the room changes. Disrespect doesn't start with someone deciding they don't like you. It starts when they sense that your emotional position is adjustable. There's a single signal underneath almost every downgrade in social dynamics: emotional dependency, not obvious neediness, not insecurity in the dramatic sense. Emotional dependency means this: your behavior subtly communicates that your internal state depends on how others respond to you. When someone questions you, you rush to justify. When someone jokes at your expense, you react big. When someone ignores you, you overcompensate. When someone pulls away, you lean forward. None of this feels weak while you're doing it. It feels reasonable and it feels mature. It feels like you're handling things the right way. But socially, it broadcasts something very specific. If you push here, I move. And movement equals leverage. Human beings constantly scan for who is emotionally self-contained and who isn't. Not consciously, instinctively. The person who stays centered without scrambling for validation feels higher in the hierarchy. The person who adjusts themselves to restore approval feels lower. That's not moral judgment. That's social math. This is why traditional confidence advice misses the point. You don't need to speak louder. You don't need to stand taller. You don't need to pretend you don't care. You need to stop signaling that your worth is negotiable. Because the moment your worth looks negotiable, people negotiate it. And once negotiation starts, respect becomes conditional. Remove emotional dependency from your behavior, even subtly, and the recalibration happens faster than most people expect. Now let's look at how this signal actually shows up in real situations. The first way emotional dependency shows up is through overreaction. When someone disrespects you, most people do one of two things. They either explode emotionally or they rush to defend themselves. Both responses feel justified, both feel strong in the moment, but both quietly transfer power, and here's why. When you react big, you confirm that the other person has influence over your internal state. They say something small, you shift emotionally. That shift tells them, without words, you can move me. Movement equals leverage. I learned this the hard way. There was a time when a colleague would make subtle remarks in meetings, nothing aggressive, just small jabs disguised as humor. I would laugh them off at first, but eventually I started defending myself mid-conversation. I would clarify my point longer than necessary. I would over-explain so nobody misunderstood me. I thought I was protecting my reputation. What I was actually doing was demonstrating sensitivity. And once someone senses sensitivity, they test it again. The shift happened the day I stopped reacting entirely. Not passive, not submissive, calm. The next time it happened, I simply said, "That's not accurate," and continued speaking. No extra explanation, no emotional spike, no performance. The room changed, not dramatically, subtly. The interruptions stopped over time. The remarks faded. Not because I argued better, but because I stopped broadcasting that I needed to win the moment. When you react strongly, you are trying to control how others see you. When you stay centered, you signal that your position doesn't require defense. And socially, the person who doesn't scramble to protect their image appears more stable in hierarchy. You don't need bigger reactions, you need fewer visible emotional adjustments. Because the calmer you are under pressure, the less negotiable your position feels. The second way emotional dependency shows up is through instant availability. This one feels harmless. It even feels generous. You respond immediately. You always say yes. You pick up every call. You adjust your schedule quickly so you don't inconvenience anyone. On the surface, it looks cooperative. Socially, it lowers perceived value. Scarcity affects status whether people admit it or not. When your time feels unlimited, your presence feels low cost, and low cost signals low rank. I used to answer messages within minutes no matter what I was doing. Late at night, early morning, in the middle of work. If someone needed something, I adjusted immediately. I thought responsiveness showed reliability. What it showed was predictability. And predictability without boundaries reads as availability without priority. The shift happened when I stopped being instantly accessible. Not in a manipulative way, not playing games, simply responding when it fit my schedule instead of reshaping my schedule around everyone else. The reaction was subtle but consistent. People began asking, "Do you have time?" instead of assuming I did. They started confirming plans instead of casually canceling. The dynamic moved from expectation to request. That difference matters. When you are always immediately reachable, you communicate that access to you requires no effort. When access requires slight delay, it introduces friction, and friction increases perceived value. You don't need to disappear. You don't need to ignore people. You simply need to stop signaling that your time is automatically available for negotiation. Because the moment your availability looks unlimited, your importance starts to feel optional. The third way emotional dependency shows up is in what you tolerate. This one is dangerous because it hides behind maturity. Someone cancels on you repeatedly. You say, "It's fine." A coworker takes credit for your idea, you stay quiet. A friend makes a cutting remark disguised as humor. You laugh it off. You tell yourself you're being calm. You tell yourself you're above it. You tell yourself it's not worth conflict. But tolerance without correction doesn't communicate strength. It communicates agreement. Social dynamics are shaped by reinforcement. When a behavior receives no resistance, it stabilizes. When it stabilizes, it becomes part of the hierarchy. That's how quiet downgrades happen. I once had a pattern where a certain person would interrupt me mid-sentence in group discussions. It happened once. Then again. Then again. Each time I let it go because I didn't want to seem reactive. But what I didn't see was that every interruption I allowed became proof of permission. The shift happened when I interrupted the interruption. Calmly. I wasn't finished. That was it. No explanation, no anger, just a boundary. The room paused. The behavior slowed. Over time, it stopped. Not because I became aggressive, but because I removed the signal that interruption was cost-free. People test where the edge is. If there is no edge, they keep walking. Boundaries are not about confrontation. They are about recalibration. When you immediately correct small violations, you prevent structural downgrade. When you absorb them silently, you teach people your position is flexible. And flexibility in rank is rarely interpreted upward. If you want respect to stabilize, you cannot treat small violations as harmless. Because socially, small violations are measurements, and measurements determine placement. The fourth manifestation is the most subtle and the most powerful. Overexplaining. When someone questions your decision, what do? Most people launch into a defense. They justify, they clarify, they stack reasons, they try to make the other person understand. It feels responsible, it feels mature, but socially, excessive explanation signals uncertainty. Not about the idea, about yourself. When you over-explain, you communicate that approval determines validity. And the moment validity looks dependent on approval, your status becomes negotiable. Think about the people you instinctively respect. When challenged, they don't rush to prove. They state their position once, calmly, and move on. I'm comfortable with this. This is the direction we're going. I've thought it through. That's it. No emotional energy spike, no persuasive performance. Because people who are certain about their internal position don't feel urgency to convince. I used to defend everything. If someone questioned my idea, I would add 5 more reasons. If someone doubted my experience, I would list credentials. I thought more explanation meant more authority. It didn't. It made me look like I needed agreement. The shift happened when I stopped explaining past the first clear sentence. If someone pushed back, I would simply say, "That's my decision," and continue. No escalation, no tension, just closure. What changed wasn't the content of what I said, it was the signal underneath it. Certainty without urgency reads higher in hierarchy than competence wrapped in validation seeking. You don't gain respect by proving you deserve it. You stabilize respect by acting as if it was never up for debate. And once you remove the need to be validated, something interesting happens. People stop testing whether you need it. Now step back and notice something. All four behaviors, overreaction, instant availability, silent tolerance, and overexplaining, are not separate problems. They are variations of the same signal, emotional dependency. Each one quietly communicates, my internal position adjusts based on your response. And once people sense that adjustment, even slightly, the social math changes. Because hierarchy is not determined by volume, it's determined by stability. The person who appears internally anchored feels harder to move. And the harder someone feels to move, the less they get tested. You don't need to become colder, you don't need to become louder, you don't need to dominate conversations or project artificial intensity. You need to remove behaviors that suggest your worth is conditional. That's the shift. You're not adding confidence, you are subtracting signals of negotiability. When you stop reacting for approval, stop being instantly reachable for validation, stop tolerating small violations without correction, and stop explaining yourself past clarity, something recalibrates. Conversations feel different, interruptions decrease, tests become rarer. Not because people suddenly admire you, but because you no longer look movable. And most disrespect ends the moment you stop looking movable. Start there. Pick one behavior and remove it this week. You don't need all four at once. Remove one signal. Watch what shifts. And once you see the pattern, you won't go back. Here's the part most people miss. Respect is not something people give you once. It's something they continuously reassess. Every reaction, every boundary, every explanation. You are either reinforcing stability or broadcasting adjustability. And people instinctively gravitate upward in hierarchy. They lean toward the person who feels self-contained. If you want long-term respect, stop trying to earn it in every interaction. Stabilize your internal position once, and let the recalibration compound over time. That's how status becomes durable. Respect was never about being louder. It was never about dominating the room. It was about removing the behaviors that signal you can be moved. Most people try to add power. Very few understand that power often appears when something unnecessary is taken away. When the leaks stop, the recalibration happens quietly. And once people stop seeing you as movable, the room feels different. In the next video, I'm going to break down the subtle shift that makes people respect you more. Without aggression, without performance, without changing who you are. Because once the signal is clean, there's one final adjustment that stabilizes it. And that's where real leverage begins.